I'm 23 now, but my life really took a turn when I was 18 and suddenly lost my home. Almost 5 years have gone by since my parents cut me off, but it still feels raw. Growing up, I never really had a healthy relationship with them. From the start, I could sense I wasn't exactly wanted. When I was little, I kept trying to earn their love and attention, but over time it became obvious I was wasting my energy. Eventually, I stopped begging for scraps of affection and just focused on myself. That shift probably started around middle school, but by the time I was in high school, I barely spoke to them unless I absolutely had to. It wasn't that I didn't want a connection with them, I did. The problem was they made it crystal clear that they didn't want one with me. Reaching out only made me feel pathetic, like I was intruding. And the sad part was, I didn't really have anyone else to lean on besides them. My dad was a pediatrician, my mom taught middle school science. They worked with kids every single day, and people admired them for being so good with other people's children. The irony was painful, they could nurture everyone else's kids, but when it came to me, their own son, they just couldn't be bothered. By high school, I had completely stopped trying to win them over. We lived in the same house, but it was like we were strangers under one roof. My dad came home late every night, and even though my mom and I got home around the same time, we didn't speak. We didn't share meals, didn't hang out, didn't even chat casually. We just stayed locked away in separate rooms. Honestly, it felt like living with random roommates instead of family. Our interactions were stripped down to the bare minimum, and even that felt forced. I also knew college was going to be on me. On my 18th birthday, they flat out told me that the only reason they'd supported me so far was because the law required it. Now that I wasn't legally a minor, they said it was time for me to stand on my own 2 feet. They framed it like they were teaching me independence, but I knew the truth, they just wanted me off their backs. Whether I thrived or failed didn't matter to them. At the time, I hadn't even applied to colleges because I'd decided to take a gap year and build some savings. Without money, college wasn't even possible. So, after I turned 18, I immediately started job hunting and eventually landed a position at a local supermarket. The pay wasn't great, but earning my own money for the first time gave me a sense of pride I hadn't felt before. Sadly, that small bit of happiness didn't last. Just a few weeks into the job, my parents dropped another bombshell: they were selling the house. Not only that, but they told me I needed to start looking for a place to live. I was stunned. When I asked why, they casually explained that they were quitting their jobs and using the money to travel the country. Apparently, this had been their lifelong dream, and now that I had a job and was old enough to survive alone, they felt they had no responsibilities holding them back. They made it sound like they were doing me a favor by giving me advance notice, but what it really meant was that I was about to be homeless. The timing couldn't have been worse. I had only just started working and barely had anything saved. I couldn't afford rent, not even if I split it with roommates. At the rate things were going, I realized I wouldn't even have enough for college the next year, like I had originally planned. I begged them not to sell the house, or at least to wait a few months so I could prepare. But they were stubborn and unmoved. They told me they'd waited long enough for this moment, and my problems were no longer theirs. I'll never forget my mom's exact words: "You're an adult now. We don't have to take responsibility for you anymore. This house is ours, and we can do whatever we want with it. Where you live is not our concern." Hearing that crushed me. That day turned into the fight of a lifetime. I lost my temper, screamed at them, cursed them out without a shred of guilt. I didn't care that they were older or that they were my parents. They were throwing me out like garbage, and I wanted them to feel just a fraction of the pain they caused me. I told them they were awful people and that I hoped terrible things came their way, because in my eyes, they absolutely deserved it. After that fight, I walked out. And just like I expected, they never called, never checked in, never cared. It was the end. The problem was that when I stormed out of the house, I quickly realized I had nowhere to go. I didn't have relatives I could lean on. My parents never really stayed in touch with their families. Both of them lived far from where they grew up, skipped most holidays, and rarely showed up for family gatherings. Because of that, I didn't have any close bonds with extended family members. Honestly, I barely knew anyone, so expecting them to take me in would have been foolish. On top of that, they lived in another state, so even if I wanted to, I couldn't exactly knock on their doors. I thought about friends from school, but most of them had already gone off to college by the time I left home. Asking their parents to let me stay would have been awkward, so I didn't even try. Instead, I took a leap of faith and called a coworker from the supermarket who, believe it or not, is now my wife. Looking back, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. She worked in the makeup department, and from the first day I started there, we had this playful back and forth. Over time, that turned into a real friendship. We opened up to each other about our lives, and I knew she had her own share of family problems, She was 2 years older than me and hadn't been able to go to college either. Her dad was an addict, her mom only cared about herself, and when she turned 18, her dad walked out to live with his brother. Her mom told her flat out that she couldn't support her anymore. So, she got a job right away and started working toward her dream of going to cosmetology school and becoming a makeup artist. When I called her that night and explained my situation, she didn't hesitate. She told me to come over immediately and said I could stay with her. I'll never forget that kindness. I honestly don't think I would have made it on my own. It was cold that time of year, and I had no one else willing to help me. Her apartment was small, and she was already scraping by with her own bills, but she still opened her door to me. That showed me exactly what kind of person she is. In the beginning, I couldn't afford rent, but I pitched in for groceries and other bills while I saved. After a few months, once I had something put away, I started helping with rent too. Before long, we went from being friends to becoming inseparable. My original plan was to work at the supermarket for a year and a half just to save money, but everything changed once I cut ties with my parents. I pushed myself harder, moved up, and eventually applied for the position of floor supervisor. Thankfully, I got the job because I'd built a reputation as one of the most reliable employees there. Life slowly started falling into place. My paycheck was decent, my wife finally got into cosmetology school while still working part-time at the store, and for the first time in years, things felt stable. We were genuinely happy, at least until last week. That's when my mother showed up completely unannounced. I still don't know how she found me after 5 years of silence, but the second I opened the door, she threw her arms around me. I hadn't even looked through the peephole, so I was completely caught off guard. Once I regained my composure, I asked her what she was doing there. She was already setting her bags down like she planned to stay. Then she looked at me with this sad expression and told me she had nowhere else to go. My father had left her. She filled me in on what had happened since the day they kicked me out. After selling the house, they traveled for about a year and a half, then eventually settled in California, bought a house, and found jobs. But just last month, my dad admitted he'd been having an affair with a waitress from a nearby restaurant and decided to leave my mom for her. After weeks of fighting, my mom said she chose her dignity over begging him to stay and walked away. Now she needed a place to live while she saved up for the divorce. She reminded me she was close to retirement and didn't want to waste money on rent, so she expected me to let her stay. The wildest part was that my mom acted like moving in with me was a done deal. She never even bothered to ask if I was okay with it. Life had come full circle, and I finally had the chance to give her a taste of her own medicine. So, I repeated her very words back to her, the same ones she threw at me when I turned 18. I reminded her that she once told me I was an adult, that I had to look out for myself, and that since it was her house, she could sell it and do whatever she wanted. Well, now the tables had turned. I told her she wasn't my family anymore, so she'd have to look out for herself, and this time it was my home, so I could decide what happened in it. I said it all with a smile, shut the door right in her face, and let out a laugh. Honestly, it was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. But not everyone agreed. My wife thought I might have gone too far. She wasn't angry, but after seeing how I handled it, she felt I could have been more forgiving. She even suggested giving my mom another chance. I know part of that comes from her own losses. Both her parents passed away in recent years, her dad from addiction and her mom from a heart attack, so I understand why she feels differently. Still, I stood my ground. After reading some comments online and sensing the tension in our own home, I finally sat down with my wife and explained everything in detail. I told her about my childhood, how my parents always treated me like an outsider in my own house. I explained that I used to try to disappear just to avoid being a burden, yet even that wasn't enough, they always found a way to push me down further. That's why I didn't feel an ounce of guilt shutting the door on my mom. For 5 years, she hadn't so much as checked on me, and now she suddenly showed up only because she needed saving. Once I laid it all out, my wife understood. She apologized for judging me too quickly and admitted she had misread the situation because of her own grief. Talking it through cleared the air, and things between us are good again. Meanwhile, my mom has been a complete nightmare. Instead of swallowing her pride and apologizing, she decided to make things worse. She started harassing me online, blasting out posts about how cruel both her husband and son had been to her, claiming she wasted her life on us only to be abandoned in her time of need. She even compared me to my dad, saying I turned out just like him. The irony, of course, is that she did the exact same thing to me, if not worse. She even made a fake social media profile and started tagging me, my wife, and a bunch of our friends and family in her rants. That's what really creeped me out. She somehow knows details about my life that I never shared with her. She knows I'm married, knows where I live, even though both my wife and I keep our accounts completely private. I can't figure out how she's getting this information, and it's unsettling. Everyone who's been tagged has been reporting her fake account, but every time one gets taken down, she just creates another. At this point, I really don't want to get the police involved because it's a headache, and both of us are swamped with work. But if she keeps escalating, we'll have no choice. For now, it's more frustrating than anything. Honestly, I just wish my dad would take her back so she'd stop targeting me. So far, it's just been annoying online drama, and I'm praying it stays that way because the last thing I want is for this nonsense to spill over into real life. Update: it's been 2 weeks since that first showdown, and my wife and I are still dealing with the fallout of saying no to her. And of course, she's found a way to take things up a notch. After the online drama, my mom started showing up at my workplace. Around noon most days, she'd wander into the store, spend over an hour there, and glare at me the whole time. She never said anything, just stood there shooting daggers with her eyes. Honestly, it was unsettling, but I made the choice to ignore her completely. For a week straight, I pretended she wasn't even there, figuring that was the best way to deal with her. Then one day, she didn't show up, and I felt relieved. I thought maybe she'd finally realized her intimidation tactics weren't working. But I was wrong. That evening, when I finished my shift and walked to my car, she was waiting for me. This time she didn't look angry, just worn down and defeated. Seeing her like that, I felt a flicker of pity. I didn't even know where she was staying since she had burned bridges with most of her old friends, and I doubted she could afford a hotel for long. Still, I didn't ask. That wasn't my problem anymore. As I tried to unlock my car, she blocked the door and insisted she needed to talk. I brushed her off, but after 5 minutes of her begging, I gave in. When I finally asked what she wanted, she broke down completely. I don't mean a few tears, she started wailing, full-on sobbing in public. And as much as I dislike her, I couldn't ignore the fact that she was clearly in pain. Against my better judgment, I told her to sit in the car with me so she could calm down before explaining herself. It took her a while, but eventually she told me the whole story. Ever since moving to California, my dad had been acting strange. When she discovered his affair with the waitress, it shattered her. She couldn't stand being in that environment anymore, so she came back here, hoping I'd take her in. The truth was, she didn't even have money. She had borrowed from a few friends just to afford the trip. She'd quit her job years ago when she started traveling with my dad, and once they settled in California, she never worked again. Now, with the marriage over, she had nobody, no job, no family, no friends she hadn't abandoned. I was her only option, and she was desperate. I listened, but I couldn't shake the disappointment. After everything she put me through, after throwing me out without a second thought, she had the audacity to expect me to save her now. I told her the most I could do was give her some money to help with expenses, but under no circumstances was she moving into my home. I didn't trust her, and I wasn't about to put my wife or myself through that chaos. That was my line. She didn't take it well. She snapped, told me she didn't want my help at all, and slammed the car door so hard it rattled. Then she stormed off. The next day, she didn't come to the store, and she hasn't shown up since. I started to think maybe she finally got the message. Update 3, almost a month has passed, and I still haven't heard from her. I finally figured out how she had gotten all that personal information about me. Years ago, I had an old Facebook account I abandoned after losing the password. It was public, and I had tagged friends in posts and uploaded pictures without thinking. That's how she learned where I lived, who I was friends with, and even details about my marriage. Once I realized that, I wasn't angry, just resigned. The damage was already done. The good news is, it seems she's given up. Some of her old friends told me she stayed at a motel for a while, but then she blocked them all and disappeared. Part of me hopes that's the end of it. Do I wish her well? Yes, in the sense that I don't want her to suffer. I may carry grudges, but I'm still human. I don't want anything terrible to happen to her. At the same time, I don't want her anywhere near me. Whatever happens next is on her. Update 4, nearly a year passed without a word from her, and I honestly thought she was tied up in divorce proceedings. I couldn't imagine how she was managing with no job and no money. Then, out of nowhere, I ran into some relatives at a cousin's wedding, and they dropped the bomb: my parents were back together. I couldn't believe it. The last time I saw her, she was devastated, swearing she'd never forgive him. Now suddenly they were a couple again? So I asked around. A few of my aunts filled me in, they're always up to date on family gossip. Apparently, after a few weeks apart, my mom gave my dad an ultimatum: file for divorce, or she'd do it herself and make it messy. But before it got that far, the truth came out. My dad had actually asked the waitress to marry him, telling her he'd left my mom for her. And the funniest part? She wanted nothing to do with him. She was seeing multiple guys at the same time and didn't take him seriously at all. Once he realized he was just one of many, he dumped her and crawled back to my mom. And just like that, they patched things up. Honestly, I think it's perfect. They deserve each other. If they had split up and dragged new people into their mess, they would have ruined those lives too. At least this way, the two of them can keep their toxicity contained. My wife and I couldn't stop laughing when we heard. They become the family punchline, and honestly, that feels like the ending they earned.